I don't know Cutter from a hole in the wall, you know? So, and I'm not too interested in talking about him. I'd rather talk about Jamie. And we don't want you.
Yeah, he didn't want to be a Flyer. So we had to come up with a plan. Fortunately, we were able to execute on that plan.
When we realized that they refused to talk to us, now it's been months, and he didn't want to be a Flyer, didn't want to be in Philadelphia, it was time to make a kid doesn't want to be there, hasn't played an NHL game yet, so he's thinking he's something else to call where he can play in, and Flyers did a great job of, like he said, keeping it on the down low and getting a great return.
With the 5th overall pick, the Philadelphia Flyers are proud to pick Gauthier.
Picture this. It's January 2026. The Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia is absolutely rocking. And Gauthier, the guy who told this city he was built to be a Flyer, skates onto that ice wearing an Anaheim Ducks jersey. The boos are immediate, loud, personal, and then he scores. The building doesn't go quiet the way it does when a respected opponent beats you. It gets louder, angrier. When a Flyers defenseman absolutely crushes Gauthier into the boards later in the game, the crowd erupts like it's a playoff goal. Philly fans were cheering a hit on a guy who, by every measure, is one of the best young players in the entire NHL. That tells you everything you need to know about where Gauthier stands right now. The numbers say elite. The reputation says something else entirely. So how does a top 5 draft pick, a guy with generational talent, end up being one of the most disrespected players in the league before he's even 23 years old? That's what we're getting into today. Draft night and a promise that didn't last. To understand why Philadelphia turned on Gauthier so hard, you have to go back to draft night 2022. The Flyers pick 5th overall.
With the 5th overall pick, the Philadelphia Flyers are proud to pick Gauthier.
Gauthier walks up, puts on that orange jersey, and says on camera for everyone to hear that he is built to be a Flyer, that he wants to be a Flyer. Now in the NHL, the draft is sacred. Teams tank for years, lose games on purpose, sacrifice entire seasons, all for the right to negotiate with a player. When a kid stands up there and says those words, the fan base believes him. They invest in him emotionally before he's even played a single game. So when Gauthier flipped the script less than a year later, telling GM Daniel Briere he'd had a change of heart, it didn't just feel like a business decision, it felt like a betrayal.
When we realized that they refused to talk to us, now it's been months, and he didn't want to be a Flyer, didn't want to be in Philadelphia, it was time to make it happen.
And it wasn't just that he changed his mind, it was how he handled it. The freeze out that Philly will never forget. Here's where things went from bad to ugly. After telling the Flyers he wanted out, Gauthier's camp essentially went dark. No communication, no explanation. He skipped development camp. His representatives stopped returning calls from the front office.
When we realized that they refused to talk to us, now it's been months.
Then, and this is the part that really set Philadelphia on fire, the Flyers sent their leadership all the way to Sweden during the World Juniors to try and patch things up. We're talking GM Daniel Briere, team president Keith Jones, making a transatlantic trip to sit down with this kid and hear him out. Gauthier refused to meet with them. He also refused to meet with Flyers legends like John LeClair and Patrick Sharp, guys who flew over specifically to talk to him, player to player. In hockey culture, that's not just disrespectful to the organization, that's disrespectful to the game. And the worst part? He never gave a real reason. Private matters, red flags. That's all Philadelphia ever got. No specifics, no vulnerability, just silence, and then a trade request. When you leave a vacuum like that, people fill it with their own story. And the story Philly told themselves was, this kid thinks he's too good for us. What the trade actually cost. In January 2024, the Flyers pulled the trigger. Gauthier went to Anaheim. Coming back to Philly was Jamie Drysdale, a solid, dependable defenseman, and a package of picks and prospects. On paper, it wasn't a disaster for the Flyers, but emotionally, it was a gut punch. Because here's the thing about Philadelphia sports fans, they don't just watch their teams, they bleed for them. The Flyers have been rebuilding for years. Gauthier was supposed to be the guy, the cornerstone, the player you build around for the next decade, and he just didn't want it. John Tortorella, one of the most old-school, no-nonsense coaches in the league, summed it up in about 4 words: we don't want you.
Then we don't want you.
That quote became a rallying cry. It gave the fan base permission to move on and move against him at the same time. The Anaheim glow-up nobody wanted to see. Here's the cruel irony of this whole story. Gauthier went to Anaheim and absolutely thrived. In his first full season with the Ducks, he put up around 20-something goals and was clearly finding his footing. Then last season, my 2025 to 26 year, he exploded. Roughly 40 goals, one of the best goal-scoring seasons by a young player the league has seen in years. To put that in perspective, the Flyers haven't had a player score 40 goals in close to 2 decades. The guy who said he didn't want to be a Flyer just did something no Flyer has done in a generation. That stings. And the hockey world noticed. Scouts, analysts, other players, they all see what Gauthier is becoming. He's got the size, the shot, the hockey sense. He's the kind of player who, if you didn't know the backstory, you'd be thrilled to have on your team. But the backstory exists, and it follows him everywhere. Why success isn't buying him any respect. This is the part that's genuinely fascinating about the Gauthier situation, because it's different from most villain stories in sports. Usually when a player forces their way out and then struggles, fans feel vindicated. See? Told you so. But Gauthier isn't struggling. He's one of the best young forwards in the NHL right now, and somehow that almost makes people more annoyed. Why? Because the narrative became he quit on a hard situation to go find an easier one. Anaheim is a rebuilding team in a non-traditional hockey market. The pressure is lower, the spotlight is smaller, the expectations are more manageable, and critics, especially in Philadelphia, look at that and say he didn't earn his success. He chose his comfort. There's also the Jamie Drysdale factor. When the Flyers acquired Drysdale, ironically from Anaheim, he came in and immediately embraced the city. Talked about wanting to be there, showed up with energy. Philly fans latched onto him hard, partly because of what he represented, a guy who wants to be a Flyer. The contrast with Gauthier couldn't be sharper, and it made the wound feel fresh all over again. The deeper issue, breaking the covenant. In North American hockey, the entry draft isn't just a transaction, it's a covenant. Teams earn the right to draft players by suffering through bad seasons. Fans sit through years of losing with the promise that the rebuild will eventually pay off. When a high pick refuses to honor that system, it doesn't just hurt one franchise. It feels like an attack on the entire structure of how the sport works. Gauthier's situation also touched on something that made a lot of people uncomfortable: the contract clock issue. After his freshman year, his camp reportedly wanted the Flyers to start his entry-level contract early, which would have burned a year of team control faster. The Flyers said no, which is completely standard, but the fact that it was even a conversation gave people the impression that Gauthier was thinking about money and leverage before he'd even proven himself at the shell level. Right or wrong, that perception stuck. And in a sport that still heavily values sacrifice, team-first mentality, and paying your dues, being seen as money first before you've done anything is a death sentence for your reputation. The silence that sealed his fate. If there's one thing that could have changed the trajectory of how people see Cutter Gauthier, it's this: a real explanation. Not private matters, not vague references to red flags, something real, something human, something that lets people understand what was actually going on in his head. Because here's the thing, people can forgive a lot in sports. They've forgiven players who've done far worse things than request a trade, but what they struggle to forgive is feeling like they've been lied to and then given nothing in return. No accountability, no vulnerability, just silence and a trade demand. Gauthier has never really opened up, and every time he plays well in Anaheim, every time he scores a big goal or puts up a monster game, that silence gets louder. Because the question never goes away. Why didn't you want to be here? Until he answers that, the boos will follow him into every building in the league, and in Philadelphia, they'll be the loudest of all. Where this goes from here. Cutter Gauthier is on a path to being one of the premier goal scorers of his generation. That's not hyperbole. The production is real, and he's only getting better. If he keeps this up, he'll be an all-star, maybe a Hart Trophy conversation, maybe a guy who helps lead Anaheim back to relevance. But respect? That's a different currency. And right now, his account is overdrawn. The only things that change the narrative at this point are a Stanley Cup, which would force even the most stubborn critics to acknowledge what he's built, or a moment of genuine honesty, a real interview, a real explanation, something that makes people feel like they finally understand the human being behind the trade demand. Without one of those two things, Gauthier will keep being the guy who had everything handed to him and still said no, the guy who quit on a city that believed in him, the guy who scores 40 goals and still gets booed off the ice. Talented? Absolutely. Respected? Not even close.